Oh boy, here we go. I hope you guys warmed up your fingers to type some angry comments down below because we're getting into it this time. Back in October last year, I shared my thoughts on The Batman, a sort of prediction of what I thought the movie would be. And to backtrack just for a moment, I was initially okay with the casting choices, and I loved the idea of Matt Reeves directing. I loved his Planet of the Apes movie, and I thought he could do a great job with this. So I was hopeful that this would actually be something special. A one off movie that maybe nails Batman, that people don't quite understand, but generates like a cult following for getting it right. Where the mainstream was sort of going to push it aside because of the casting and etc. But you know, the actual fans would be like, "Oh yeah, this is great." That's what I thought this would be. And then the trailers came out, and I was concerned because I could see a bunch of what I'll call technical problems. Nothing in the trailer looked good. The costume design, choreography, even the way the dialogue was delivered by the actors, it all seemed off, a little bit weird. Now, I can say that I've seen this movie now. I have seen this movie. And I was right. While watching the movie, I took a bunch of notes. These are the things that stood out to me, thoughts I had while I was watching that I jotted down. And I'm going to link that down below so you can read my unfiltered thoughts and also see some things that will not be mentioned in this video simply because I didn't have time to include them, or they weren't that big of a deal, but they were still a deal. So check that out too so you can see those. Now, before we talk about Batman himself, let's just go over the film's plot and then we'll dive into the nitty gritty after. So, this is a year two Batman. So, this is a Batman who should have ironed out all the year one kinks, established his status in Gotham City and his relationship with Jim Gordon, and made his mark in the city. Remember, comic book Batman recruits Dick Grayson as Robin in year three. So that should give you an idea of where in Batman's sort of progress he should be. And this is a fitting timeline because this plot is loosely, and I say very loosely, based off of The Long Halloween, which, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me down below, but I believe that overall sits at around sort of year 2.5 to 3-ish, like early 3, where it begins and sort of carries from there. The story is basically that Riddler has made his first appearance and is killing the corrupt Gotham elites. Batman is then recruited by Jim Gordon to solve these murders and bring order to Gotham. It's very elementary. Riddler in this movie is basically Harvey Dent in The Long Halloween, except it's not a holiday killings, it's just killing politicians for revenge, essentially. Now, the whole pacing of the story is actually interrupted by Catwoman, and it's a really awkward introduction to Catwoman, and it basically sidetracks everything for personal vendettas. And like I said, it's taken straight out of The Long Halloween. So if you're familiar with that story, that is this movie, except watered down and stretched out, and then swapping the holiday killer for Riddler. And, it's kind of like a Peter Jackson treatment. This movie should have been about 60 minutes long, but it wasn't. And now that we know the plot and we've got that out of the way, let's get into that nitty gritty. Let's start peeling back the layers of this onion. Let's get into it. So we'll start with what you all want to know. Batman. How was Robert Patterson as Batman? Not good. The Batman in this movie comes across as an underprepared, both mentally and physically, to deal with any of the situations that he's put in. In the notes I wrote, Batman speaks like a MySpace profile. Now, all of the dialogue that comes out of his mouth is so immature and edgy that it makes you cringe on the edge of your seat. The opening monologue literally has him say, "Spending years in the night has turned me into a nocturnal animal." And he speaks like that. And it's really, really cringy. I'm vengeance. Like, it's so weird, and it's not broody, it's mopey and immature. At one point, he actually yells at Alfred. He goes, "You're not my father!" This made me laugh out loud. Bruce is meant to be in his mid-20s, early 30s, and he's acting like he's still 14. None of this comes across as cool or mature or like a broken stoic Batman. Like, I was physically cringing at most of the dialogue choices in this movie. It feels like a cheap fan movie from circa 2007, filmed at the back of a Comic-Con to Rob Zombie's Super Beast. Like, that's what this feels like. It's like an anime AMV all over again, except with a much bigger budget. It's cringe. It's really bad. It's the sort of thing, like, the Batman is a message board post you made back in 2006 on your favorite band's forum when your username was twistednails_suicide XXX. Yeah, we know. That's what this movie feels like. It's very awkward. Now, the Batsuit itself in this movie looks bad. The mouthpiece is huge. Like, it starts above the cheeks, like right under the eye line and the ear line, and keeps the jaw completely open. It might look good on some actors, I don't know. Generally, the mouthpiece is a little bit smaller to, cover up the identity of Batman. And Robert Patterson has a mole on his cheek. I didn't know this because I've actually never watched many things he's been in. But there's a mole on his cheek, and you can see it in and out of costume. So it's like, you're looking at this guy being like, Bruce Wayne, take that mask off. Like, it's so obvious. It's the least convincing Batman costume I've ever seen. On top of that, the whole thing is like floppy and cheap looking. The boots don't fit. The cape is cheap and all over the place. It doesn't look like it's like strong enough to actually make him fly. Like, the whole thing is weird. And on that note, like, there is a scene where he glides in this movie, and it's a different cape. Like, you can see it's one of those Red Bull glider suits, and they've just sort of like CG'd it to make it look like a cape that's tied around both of Bruce's feet. Like, it looks stupid, and you can tell, and it shows. This is Robert Patterson sort of cosplaying as Batman with like an eBay cosplay. In my notes, I actually wrote, Robert Patterson's build makes it look like Jack Skellington is cosplaying Batman. And the other really bizarre choice this movie made is that Batman's not good at his job. Alfred actually does all of the detective work for Batman and solves all of the Riddler's riddles. And Selina Kyle does 90% of Batman's legwork for him. In fact, Batman spends more of his time complaining about the crime than he does solving crimes. It's really weird. I've never seen a less proactive Batman ever. And I'll give you a few examples of some of the really stupid things in this movie. There is a scene, and these aren't really spoilers, they're just very minor. And look, if you couldn't figure out some of these riddles, you need to go back to, I don't know, preschool. And, do some color by numbers or something. Because, there's a scene where Batman stares at a maze for about 30 seconds. It's like a rat maze with cheese at the end, it's that sort of thing. It's like bought from a pet shop. And he's staring at it, and Gordon's invested in the crime scene, and then Batman just pauses and goes, "It's a maze." Yeah, we figured that out about 30 seconds ago when we first saw it in the corner of the room. And we went, "Oh, there's a rat cage over there in a maze." And then there's another bit where, like, one of the riddles is a rat with wings. And Batman's response to that is, "Penguin. Penguin's a rat, and he's a bird. He's a rat with wings. I better go see the penguin." These are riddles a 10-year-old could answer without batting an eyelid. Like, it takes Batman over half the movie, over an hour and a half, to figure out that a rat with wings is a bat. It's awful. The audience were actually screaming out the answers to these riddles because Batman couldn't figure them out and they were getting frustrated. And that's a major problem when your audience are solving the complex riddles that are meant to drag the plot out for 2 hours and 50 minutes. And Batman's left staring at the screen trying to figure it out like it's the Da Vinci Code. It creates a very boring movie when you solved it at the 20-minute mark. and now you have to watch Batman try and figure it out. It's like when you know the answer to something, or you're teaching someone inept like how to cook or do something, and all they have to do is move A to B, and it's so obvious and they can't figure it out, and you get frustrated. That's the emotions you get watching this movie. Now, onto Batman's voice. The voice is a very important thing. We've got the famous Christian Bale growl. We've got Kevin Conroy. Batman's voice is iconic. And, let's be thankful there is no Christian Bale growl in this. But the replacement isn't much better. Robert Patterson's voice is all over the place. In some scenes, it's a breathy whisper, and he talks like this all the time. And then in others, it's squeaky and high and up here. You're not my father. And then for all the monologues, like the things you could tell Robert Patterson did in a sound booth, he puts on this voice, trying his best to be Christian Bale. And you can tell he sort of didn't have a clear direction to go with this, and he just phoned it in because he ran out of time. It's just, it creates a very inconsistent vibe to the movie. And on top of that, like I mentioned before, Batman isn't doing anything in this movie. Most of the time he's spent teamed up with Catwoman, and it isn't fun. Like, when he first sees Catwoman, he literally, he's in the middle of a conversation with Penguin, and he stops what he's doing and stares at her for 20 or 30 seconds. And the Penguin's just staring at him and is like, bro, do you need a moment? If the camera panned down, you would swear he had a little boy boner at seeing Selina Kyle just walk by and serve drinks in a bar. It's really awkward. The amount of weird pauses whenever he's looking at Selina Kyle, it's like this forced romance thing, and it doesn't work because the story isn't setting any of it up. And then right after that scene, and I mean literally the next scene, cuts to Batman watching Selina Kyle with a pair of binoculars on the roof, and he's not in the Batsuit. He's wearing a hoodie and a beanie, so it looks like a voyeur. And he's got the binoculars, and he's watching Selina Kyle get dressed. So you're watching her strip down and then put the Catwoman suit on. And it's dragged out too long, and it's creepy. It makes you think Batman is a voyeur, a lonely incel voyeur, and not Batman. There's nothing alpha male about this Batman. It's very immature and cringy. The way I can describe Batman in this movie is he's a child being dragged off through the supermarket for the first time by his parents, who would be Catwoman and Alfred in this movie, while they do everything they can to stop him from wandering off and getting lost. Hold my hand, Batman, we're just going down this aisle. It's really, really poor. But moving on from that, let's just talk about Catwoman. Other than having cats in her apartment and Batman going, "You have a lot of cats," there's nothing Catwoman about this Catwoman. It's the Catwoman from... Is it the Catwoman from? Oh, I'm forgetting the Long Halloween. Never mind. Scrap that. I'll have to read that up later and find out why my brain had a fart at that moment. But she's all over the place in this movie. I'm not sure whose influence any of the decisions around Catwoman were, but she's also whiny and immature and has absolutely no depth. And the dialogue that she was either given or chose to use in this movie, and some of the scenes they put her in, just make you roll your eyes in the back of your head. There's a particular scene where she's walking through the Penguin's nightclub, and Batman's watching her through a pair of contact lenses that have cameras in them. And while she's walking around, the camera makes a point of showing all these old white dudes, and they're all politicians, ogling at her breasts and her lower half. And Batman makes this uncomfortable statement about the male gaze. He's repulsed by it. And Catwoman's yeah, it feels great, doesn't it? It's completely unnecessary for the plot. It doesn't serve a purpose. And I can already see the comments down below being it's to show that the politicians in Gotham are part of the criminal underworld and they're seedy. No, it's not, because there are other scenes in this movie that have similar rhetoric that have nothing to do with politicians as well. But you'll have to read about that in my notes, because I'm not actually tackling that scene in this review, but it's the very first scene in the movie, and it's obvious. Now, after that, there's also another moment with Selina Kyle and Batman on a rooftop. And She actually says, all anyone cares about in this place are these white, privileged assholes. Right before she makes out with Batman. Without consent, by the way. So you consent people, you weird consent people out there who like screech about that. Like, Ree! Yeah, she basically forces one on him. And they're not together. There's no like romantic chemistry between them. 2 scenes prior, she's like screaming at him and hating him. Like, there's nothing to suggest these people should be romantically involved in this movie other than the director putting them in these awkward scenes. And it's out of place and it feels weird. And like, none of these quips are clever either. Like, they're cringy and they stand out. And it just, like I said before, you roll your eyes when you hear them. It's awkward. And the whole dynamic between Batman and Catwoman comes across as forced and uncomfortable. The first scene they meet in costume, Catwoman does like all these really pointless taekwondo kicks and they barely connect, and Batman doesn't even react to them. He's just standing there. And in fact, yeah, Batman doesn't react at all. Like, he just like does like one high guard, like, you know, like over the ear, like a typical boxer guard, and then like lets her just kick at him a bunch of times. And then he just like watches her while she takes like a few steps and runs to the middle of the room, jumps on a dining table, and then leaps at him. And then at that point, he just catches her in midair because that never works. Like, if she threw a Superman punch or something, it would have hit him because he wasn't prepared. But he just catches her. And then he slams her back on the table she jumped off from. And like her legs are like wrapped around his waist and like, you know, and she's just laying there groaning and grunting. And it's about 15 seconds of her groaning and grunting while the camera slowly zooms in on her face being like, uh. And it's like, once again, it's forced and uncomfortable and there's no reason for it. Like, it's very out of place and strange. And I'm not a prude when it comes to like romance and sex scenes in movies and romantic tension and all that. I'm actually a sucker for it. But in this movie, it makes no sense. There's nothing explaining a connection between these characters other than Batman stalked her and then showed up at a room, and I even told her, he was like, I was watching you at your house. Like, and it's just like, ugh, it's so creepy. Like, this is not like a super heroic vigilante Batman at all. There's another scene as well where there's two other scenes. There's a scene where for some reason Batman is watching Selena Kyle on the video footage he took, and he's just got this one scene repeating of her saying that she's not romantically involved with Falcone. And it's literally on repeat, and it reads like a jealous boyfriend like watching his breakup, even though he's only known Selena Kyle for about 2 hours. Like, and even like Alfred's like, is this your girlfriend? Have you got a new girl? Well, it looks like you upset her. Like, and it's like, no, he's known her for an hour. And then there's another part with the whole Batman, like, Bat and the cat relationship where they're like investigating a room. They're not even investigating, they're just talking in a room they shouldn't be in. And then like a guard comes in. So Batman like grabs Selena Kyle and like, you know, does the whole like pulls her around the corner and like covers her mouth so she doesn't talk. And then like, it's weird, like the placement of his hands, it's like across her chest and then on her mouth. And then his other hand is like on her lower belly and pelvic region. And it looks like, you know, like Dirty Dancing or or Ghost. Like, it's weird the way he's holding her, and I think it's because of the way the camera's set up. Like, it's, once again, it like focuses on this moment and not the guy in the background, and it slowly zooms in on Batman and Catwoman in this position for about 30 seconds, and it's like, it's just weird. And then like right after that, she's like not mad or like tries to keep fighting him or anything. They just start talking. And it's just, it's inconsistent, awkward, and weird and uncomfortable. There's nothing memorable about this Catwoman's performance. Nothing stands out. Like, the costume doesn't stand out. The actions don't stand out. None of her particular scenes stand out either. It's the sort of like thing where in a year's time you'll have forgot she was even in the movie. You really would. Now, moving on from Catwoman though, Jim Gordon is absolutely fine in this. In fact, in terms of a performance, him and Penguin are the most comic book accurate characters in the movie. And it's sad. I wish these characters were utilized better or used in a completely different movie, because they're actually really good. Like Colin Farrell's Penguin, you want to see that in a standalone movie or just in a movie with more direction. And same with Gordon. Gordon's actually really good in this. You got nothing to worry about with Gordon and Penguin. They're the two standouts of this entire movie. It's a shame they were barely used because I would actually, like I said, I would like to see more of those two. They were fine. Alfred is also barely in the movie. He's purely used to drive the plot forward, and like I mentioned before, he actually solves all of the Riddler's riddles for Batman. Batman can't figure any of them out. Like he's got all these ciphers, and Alfred's like doing them like in the morning. He's like having his coffee and tea, and he's like got like the crossword in the newspaper, but it's the Riddler stuff, and he's solving them all. And Batman's just like staring at him like, "How do you know how to do this?" Like Batman has no idea in this movie. Yeah, so Alfred is a better Batman than Batman in this movie, and he's only in it for 5 minutes. Now, the Riddler, the Riddler is the big bad guy of the movie. You know that in the trailers. He's the man who set all of this in motion. So, the Riddler and the Batman is, well, he's underwhelming. And there's a few reasons why. Firstly, the writing team came up with the most obvious mundane riddles. Nothing was clever or complex or dragged out. Like, all the riddles were just like one answer riddles that lead to another riddle or a location or a person. And like, you'll know all the answers to the riddles about 2 to 3 minutes before the movie wants you to know them. And that's a huge problem for the pacing of the movie. And the other big problem is, like I've mentioned before, this movie is loosely based off The Long Halloween. And Riddler is a replacement for the Harvey Dent character. So eventually, like, it's a 3 hour movie almost. And the Riddler runs out of riddles. Like, he's just the Wish version of the holiday killer that doesn't kill on holidays. And, like, his whole storyline takes a back seat for, like, an hour and 20 minutes and then comes back. And it's stupid. Because you actually forget about him. You're like, what was Batman trying to do again? Like, you just forget about him. So it's a weird combination of boring grade school riddles and a lack of real planning and motivation for the character that creates one of the most lackluster and forgettable villains in a Batman movie. Now, a lot of this would be forgivable if the action in the movie was decent. Take John Wick, for example. The story's nonsensical, It's like, everyone agrees on that. Like, if you read the blurb, you're like, what? This sounds silly. And then you watch it and you see Keanu Reeves kicking ass and doing all his jujitsu and gun fu, and it's incredible. And you go, wow, that was cool. You turned a silly plot into an incredible movie. And the reason I bring that up is because that's what Batman movies should be. Batman as a concept is silly. It's a guy dressing up as a bat fighting clowns and criminals. Like, it's silly. So you need to be able to take those silly plots and convince your audience that it's real and there's weight to it. And this movie doesn't do that. It just comes across as silly and forgettable. And the action scenes don't help. You can tell that Robert Patterson didn't put any real thought into the fight scenes, and his choreographers weren't willing to tell him. Like, one, he's too skinny. Like, he's not fit in this movie at all. He's like skinny fat. And two, he doesn't know how to fight. The opening conflict has Batman fighting some street thugs, and he has no head movement. His punches are very sloppy. The footwork's terrible, and it's that typical like Last Jedi, like all the bad guys sort of stand around in a circle and come in one at a time. And like it's poorly choreographed. And the very next fight scene has Batman taking out some dudes at the Penguin's club. Now, the very reason he's fighting at the club is because the world's greatest detective decided the best way to get into Penguin's club is to knock on the front door and ask to come in. Literally. They open the door and Batman's standing there, and do you know what he says? I'll give you 3 seconds. He says, "Do you know who I am?" I'm like, what? Once again, I cringed. And they replay this scene like 3 times over because they think it's funny, but it's not a comedy, so it just comes across as like repetitive and boring and silly. And the very next fight after that is obviously he fights these guards at the front door because they won't let him in because he's Batman and he should have snuck in because that's what Batman does. He fights them, but it's all filmed above the shoulders. So you only see Batman from the shoulders up, and you don't actually see the punches being thrown or anything. He just sort of wiggles a bit and they fall over. And that's a repeating like technique used in this movie, is like the clever camera angles to try and cover up bad choreography and combat. And it's really annoying. Like, love it or hate it, The warehouse fight scene from Batman vs Superman is the gold standard for Batman fight scenes. If you're going to do a Batman video game or movie or anything Batman, you need to be watching that scene and going, what did they get right here? You know what I mean? Like, what makes this so good, and how can I bring that into my movie? Not have Batman rolling into the bad guys like a bowling ball, which actually happens towards the end of the movie. That is one of the things he does. He rolls into the bad guys and they fall over like bowling balls. Not joking. It's in the movie. I would show it, but, I can't do that. Now, I know this video is a little long, but we still have a lot more to talk about, and we're going to get on to the spoilers. So consider this your final warning. Spoilers ahead. Even if I could forgive everything previously mentioned, the Batman's final sin that this movie commits is the fact that, and once again, guys, I'm spoiling things. Batman doesn't win. He loses in this movie. And I don't know if it's meant to read off as that, but that is what happens. By the end of the movie, he is not victorious. He's the loser. And that shouldn't surprise you. The Batman in this movie spent the whole time being dragged around by the supporting cast. He was unable to solve any of the Riddler's riddles, unable to piece anything together, and the decisions he actually makes in the movie turn out to be wrong, like thinking a rat with wings is a penguin. Hell, the final clue is the murder weapon from the beginning of the movie. It's a cornering tool for laying carpet. And this whole movie, Batman doesn't know what it is. And then a police officer tells him, "This is a carpeting tool. My dad used it. He was a carpenter." This is nearly 3 hours of Batman failing to do his job. And the payoff for that is that he does fail. During the final confrontation with the Riddler, excuse me, the Riddler even calls out the stupidity of Batman. He's like, "That wasn't my plan. I thought you were supposed to be the smart guy." Even the bad guy in this movie is let down by Batman's performance in the movie. And the result of this is thousands of people dying. Like, do you guys remember the backlash Man of Steel got for the higher levels of destruction in Metropolis? Man of Steel has nothing on the Batman. It turns out this whole time the Riddler had bombs planted all around the seawall of Gotham City, and he's rigged them to explode, causing the entire city to flood. Like, the entire seawall comes down, and probably tens of thousands of people die in this flooding that lasts for 2 weeks, where Gotham's literally completely underwater. Like, this is the end of the movie. This really happens, guys. This is the end of the movie. So, if you want to see 3 hours of Batman failing to be Batman and then losing and being outdone by one of the worst Riddlers you've ever seen with grade school level riddles, this is your movie right here. Now, that's just when all is said and done. This is a movie where every decision made was a bad one, other than Gordon and Penguin's casting. In fact, there is a scene in this movie that sums everything up perfectly. Batman has to escape from Gotham PD, so he jumps off of the roof of Gotham PD and crashes into a bridge at Mach 1 speeds. Like, he's like a jet. It's like, like it's crazy. And he's not paying attention to what he's doing because he's an idiot in this movie. And he smashes into the side of a bridge. Like, at full speed, it's like, whoosh, boom. And it like snaps his neck and everything. Like, it's really crazy. And not only that, so he hits the bridge, and as he's falling, a bus goes and crashes into him, which sends him flying into a light post where it's like, woo, dong. And then he lands on the floor and gets up and walks away like nothing happens. He just gets up and walks away. Like, even Batman should have been dead. Like, that's enough to, like, knock out Superman. for at least a few seconds, but no, Batman has plot armor in this. He gets, like, he's holding a bomb that blows up in his hands at one point, like, right in his face. It has no damage. It's so bad. That isn't everything, though. Like I said, in the video description, you'll find a link to my footnotes while watching this movie, and they tackle some other things that don't make it into this review. So please check that out. Have you guys seen this movie? Like, have you watched The Batman? Do you even want to now? Like, share your thoughts down below, please. I'll see you in the next video. I gotta stop this. It's so bad.